We can now bring in our international affairs editor, Philip Turle. Philip, great to see you. We do have the Ukrainian president speaking with Donald Trump right now. What do you think Zelensky will be asking from him?
It's pretty obvious that Volodymyr Zelensky is going to be talking to Donald Trump about the pressure that Donald Trump is supposedly putting on Vladimir Putin, moving towards the acceptance of this ceasefire agreement that Ukraine has already agreed to in negotiations last week with the Americans. The deal was that Donald Trump was going to talk to Vladimir Putin and get the Russians on board to move forward with this ceasefire deal with a view to a long-term peace deal between Ukraine and Russia and an end to the war. What we've got after that phone call yesterday with Donald Trump, between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, is a pledge by the Russian leader just to stop the attacks on the energy infrastructure for a 30-day period. But if you look at the situation there, it doesn't really mean very much for Vladimir Putin because we're coming out of the winter. So there's not so much of a demand on the energy infrastructure as there would be, for example, if that pledge was made in the month of October, just before the winter. So Vladimir Putin is not really losing very much. And I think there will be a lot of questions asked by Volodymyr Zelensky as to what he thinks Donald Trump is going to do next and how Donald Trump is going to stack the pressure on the Russian President Vladimir Putin, because as things go right now, Donald Trump has pressurized Ukraine to accept this ceasefire agreement in that pretty vociferous meeting in the Oval Office. Then Ukraine agreed to sign that ceasefire proposal. But he hasn't really put any pressure on the Russian leader. And I think that's something that is quite worrying for the Ukrainians, because I think there's a feeling in Ukraine that if this doesn't work out, then Donald Trump is going to start increasing pressure on Ukraine to agree to everything Russia wants just to get a quick fit ceasefire through, and then that Donald Trump can move on to something else.
Because what is the likelihood that Vladimir Putin does actually sign on, that respect this ceasefire on Ukraine's energy infrastructure?
Well, so far it doesn't look as though it has been respected. And one of the complaints by Volodymyr Zelensky over the years has been that whatever you ask Vladimir Putin for, and he agrees to, notably a ceasefire, look back to the Minsk I and Minsk II ceasefire agreements, he's never respected anything. So how can you have any faith in Vladimir Putin when he says he will do something, because immediately afterwards he doesn't do that? And we've seen that overnight. There have been these widespread Russian attacks on infrastructure in Ukraine just a few hours after Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin were talking on the telephone, and the Russian leader pledged to stop those attacks against the energy infrastructure for a 30-day period. So I think there's a feeling in Ukraine that really this isn't going anywhere, and anger as well that they say that and see that Donald Trump has all these cards in his hand. Notably, he could put pressure on Vladimir Putin by saying, look, if you don't stop the war, I'm going to take the necessary steps to admit Ukraine into NATO. And if you don't stop the war, I'm going to take the necessary steps to increase US firepower in Ukraine to push back those Russian troops. I think there's a feeling of frustration in Kyiv that there is no real pressure being put on the Russian President Vladimir Putin by Donald Trump. Donald Trump seems to be playing him along, and a feeling underneath that what Donald Trump is basically looking for is to improve relations with Russia with a view to getting business deals there later on once the Ukraine war is over. And he doesn't want to rustle too many feathers with Vladimir Putin because he sees him as a very important business partner for the future.
Indeed, we'll see. We'll see what comes out of this phone call once we get the information. Thank you very much.